So today is our review day for our test next class period. So I'm kind of glad that we have pushed, because the weather should be warmer. I don't think we're looking at a 2-hour delay again. So it's definitely tricky with the red days when your classes are shortened. Today's schedule just has no TA and stinger. So the times are a little off. I'll write them on the board in a minute. But for the most part, we get full class periods today. You're going to go from here to period 6, and then period 8, and then on home. So that's how we handle the 2-hour delays on both days, which is good. All right, would you please look at your warm-up? I want you on this side of your warm-up. And what I would like you to do, your copy is a little bit different from mine. When we talk about analyzing triangle congruence, we really need to have a strategy where we have a pattern of behavior that we approach each problem. Where we ask ourselves, what do I see? What do I know? What do I need? And one of the hardest parts about this is keeping straight the difference between what I'm proving and what I'm given and what I can figure out on my own. So your number one step when you're looking at these triangles is to study the given information. Ask yourselves, what do I see? And usually that's what our given is. What I know, what can I get from that given? For example, parallel lines give you alternate interior angles. A diagram might give you vertical angles. A right triangle might give you congruent right angles. So there's a difference between what's given and what I can figure out on my own. When we talk about what information that each of these features provides, would you please, with your partner, take a minute and go ahead and look at parallel lines, perpendicular lines, vertical angles, the reflexive property, an isosceles triangle, midpoints and angle bisectors, and just brainstorm and take notes on what each of those topics will give you. Instead of the what do I know, where we talk about what do I see, what do I know, what do I need, instead of it being what's given to us, what information can we draw from each of these geometric features? Turn to your partner, talk about it, and take notes. Go ahead. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about this a little bit. First of all, let's come over here to this side of the warm-up. And we have 5 different ways of proving that the triangles are congruent. Now, your paper is divided into 2 different sections. And the only reason why this really matters is because it's worth it to understand the difference between what are theorems and what are postulates. And the postulates are the ideas that Euclid gave us. So when we talk about a postulate, that's something we don't have to prove. So Euclid said, hey, if you're looking at congruence, if you have these 3 pieces of information, you don't need to worry about anything else. Would you please turn to your partner and fill in this chart and verify that you know the difference between what's a postulate that was given, what's a theorem that we can prove, and what is a relationship that is not about congruence. Turn and talk to your partner about each of these. Go. All right, so the very first one that he gave us was our side, saying, hey, if you have 3 congruent sides matching up with 3 congruent sides of a triangle, you're guaranteed congruent. Move on. Then we talked about side, and angle, and the most important parts about this one is making sure that you're looking at the included angle. Because if you look down here, 2 sides and an angle that's not included is not going to guarantee congruence. That was that warm-up where I had 2 different triangles that are possible. One's a cube, one's obtuse. Now the interesting thing is here, this angle, side angle, we were talking about this one, you're like, okay, wait a minute, that side doesn't have to always be included because that leads me to my angle side because of my 3rd angle theorem. So what works for 2 angles and a side does not work for 2 sides and an angle. Now our hypotenuse leg is a version of angle side. You're like, they're so confusing. So we don't call it that, we just call it hypotenuse leg. because we only have a hypotenuse if we have a right angle or a right triangle. So if I see that right angle, I don't have to worry about those two possible triangles, the acute and obtuse, because my triangle is right. And Pythagoras justifies this one. Keeping this straight in your head is an important conversation. All right, study the given information is always step one. When we're talking about parallel lines, now however you want to take these notes, when I look at parallel lines, I'm always looking for congruent corresponding angles and alternate interior angles. It might have an alternate exterior angle. Consecutive interior angles are not my jam because they're the ones that are supplementary, and I'm always looking for congruence. So if I see parallel lines, I'm looking for a transversal, corresponding angles, and alternating interior angles. If somebody gives me a set of perpendicular lines, well, that's an easy one. I'm always looking for my right angles. Anytime I see perpendicular, I'm like, are those angles right angles? And can I do right triangles? Because if I have a right angle, and then if I have a right triangle, I'm in business. Something else you might want to consider is if I have some right angles, I have two right angles, those lines might be parallel. So I can move on to look at those parallel lines and the perpendicular relationships. If I'm given a set of vertical angles, I want to make sure that you know which angles are congruent, those opposite angles. So if you have a diagram or a picture, I'm thinking a rectangle with two diagonals drawn, those vertical angles are always going to be congruent. Now the interesting thing was I was talking to Evelyn, and when we're thinking about this reflexive property, we have to be super careful because sometimes our reflexive property does not have me switching my vertices. So if I look at that triangle, I have that triangle as flipped, and if I'm naming these vertices of x and y, I know that x, y is congruent to x, y, and there's no need to switch those vertices around because that one triangle is a reflection and I don't have that problem. Now the interesting thing is don't memorize it just by whether or not it's reflection, because on your homework we had something that looked like this. And if I have here vertex A and vertex B, I would need to say that AB is congruent to BA. And the difference is the orientation of the points. So if you look at the orientation of the vertices, if they're in the same order in the triangle, we need to be careful about our reflexive property. Do those two pictures help you? Evelyn, do you want me to draw them bigger, or are we okay? Okay, go Joey.
Would you get it wrong if you said xy is congruent to yx?
Yeah, because it's not. Because every time you make a congruent statement, you need to have corresponding vertices match up. And here, xy corresponds to xy. Here, AB corresponds to BA. So it really depends on the picture. And that's why this year, because we did that unit 3 already, this time last year the kids didn't have rotations, reflections, and translations yet. So I love it, like fancy this, I like a change that they're making us do. They put our transformations unit early on so that we can talk about reflections, rotations, and slides the whole way through, talking about triangle congruence, and next unit when we talk about similarity. It's actually pretty awesome. So make sure that the reflexive property makes sense to you. 100%, if you're staring at a problem and you can't figure out what the heck it's getting to, take a minute and look for an isosceles triangle, because an isosceles triangle gives you angles or legs. So if you're told it's isosceles, you have those two sets of congruent features that you didn't have before. Sometimes you're given legs, so then you got the angles. Sometimes you're given angles, so then you got the legs. So definitely be on the lookout for an isosceles triangle to give you more information. If you're told that something is the midpoint, by definition, that means that that point divides a segment into two congruent pieces. They might be the ones that you need for your triangles. If you're told that something is an angle bisector, then it's going to divide that angle into congruent spaces, congruent measures, and that might be what you need. So if you're told it's a midpoint, if you're told it's a bisector, that's information that gives you one of these pieces. Every time you approach a proof, you're looking for 3 sides, 2 sides included angle, 2 angles included side, or any 2 angles in the side, or a hypotenuse leg story. Make sense? All right. Now you don't have these, just I do. What I would like you and your partner to do is I would like you to decide how you would prove each of these triangles congruent, and I just want you talking about it. Turn to each other and talk. Go. All right, let's talk about number 1. What did you and your partner agree on? Everybody say it out loud. Go. Yeah, that is a side, the included angle, and the side. This side corresponds with this one. Then I have my included angle, and then I have this side corresponding with this one. All right, what did you see here?
Angle, side.
Angle, angle, side. I have these 2 angles correspond. These 2 angles correspond. Where do I get the side?
Reflexive.
My reflexive property of congruence gives me angle, angle, side. All right, are you ready? With your partner, talk about these 2. Go.
Side, angle. Wait, that wasn't angle. So we got side.
All right, let's talk about 3. How are they congruent? They're not. What if I asked you how they were related? All right, I see vertical angles, so that gives me an angle, but how are they related? What do you see, Caroline? Yeah, whether, look at her, she's a nice girl, she doesn't want to curse in geometry. Whether we call it side angle, that is not a congruence postulate. And I've had arguments with kids that say, but because they're attached like that, there's no way that those are not congruent because I'm not going to be able to change them. And they're right. But because side angle doesn't work every single time it works in this case, okay, because the triangles are attached. But because it doesn't work every time, because we started off the unit with an example of where some people drew an acute triangle and some people drew an obtuse triangle, because it doesn't work every time, we cannot use it as a congruence postulate. So that's a no-no. What do you see here? Side, because I have this reflexive property. Let me ask you something. If I named this point A and this point B, when I list the congruent corresponding parts, is that AB is congruent to AB or AB is congruent to BA? Which one?
AB is congruent to AB.
Yeah, that's the one where it matches up because it has that fold and no twisting is happening, right? Are we okay on that? All right. Here comes what's next. You have, what I want to show you is under the triangle congruence, and we have last night's homework. If I go here, congruent triangles in CPC-TC, I posted a key, and this key is my handwritten full absolute proof of how each of these triangle proofs will work. So what you're looking at on the back of your warm-up, what you're looking at in the back of your warm-up is just my ideas. That's like a rough draft. Think of it like an outline. But it's not an official good proof. Here's the official good proofs that I did on a separate sheet of paper. Does that make sense to you? So after you're done finishing the game, I want you and your partners to talk about the homework proofs, and I want you to talk about them from the outlines. I want you to see if you can read my notes. I want to see if you can find the angles, if you agree with my approach. Now, I guarantee you there are other right answers. So if you did it a way different from me, there's a chance that you did it right. So take that time to talk to your group mates. And then if you want to, you can go in and check your work with mine later. Sound okay? All right. So I'll put you into groups and you guys can do the sort now. Eyes up here. The only one that was the most missed, was this picture. And I want to take the time to talk about it because a lot of you missed the corresponding angles. That, and that, and that. And then we're given CE and FG are parallel. So, yeah. So we're given these are congruent, and we're given these are congruent. But when we're told that these two lines are parallel, what I want you to see is that then here is a transversal. And that transversal is going to create two corresponding angles that are congruent. So that was definitely the most missed. This group here did not make a single mistake. I think I found a mistake in every group other than that, right? Did you guys get them all too? All right, so Molly, you guys can put a Smarty up, and Marisol, you guys can put a Smarty up. That's good work because we want to make sure that we have it all down. All right, we have, I would say, 25 minutes. We have about 15 minutes left. So I'm not sure that's enough to play the game. So what I'm going to have you do is I'm going to pass out your review packets and let you get started on that, along with allowing you to take your computers out and work on any Delta math that you haven't finished. Listen carefully. If you need a retake and you have not completed the Delta math, your retake doesn't count. I'll say that one more time. Part of what you agree to on the red retake contract is the fact that you've done all your homework. And if I am grading your retake, it takes me about 3 clicks to go into Delta Math to see if you've done the Delta Math. And if you haven't done the Delta Math, your retake doesn't count. Now, you won't be surprised at this, but listen. I've graded the Unit 4 retakes, and there are a couple of people who didn't do the Delta Maths. So I was like, oh, I have to have a difficult conversation with these people about why the retake doesn't count. And then it didn't matter. How come? Because their retake wasn't any better than their original score, because why? They didn't do the homework. They didn't practice. They didn't study. They didn't prepare. If you go to bed at night and you're like, please, please, please let me understand geometry, and you do no math or practice, that is ridiculous as me saying, please, 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 let me be stronger without ever lifting a single hand weight. No brain power comes from no work. Are you with me on that?
Yeah.
If you don't do the work, you're not going to understand the math. That's an easy, easy, easy direct correlation. All right, these packets are yours to study. What I'd also like to see, could you please go to the back of your unit, where am I? There we go, there's my mouse. Would you please go to the very front of your packet where you have your assignment sheet, and would you please look at the back of the assignment sheet? What you have there is a blank area for you to then review and discuss concept summaries. Now, ideally, each box is its own idea. But what I'd like you and your group mates to do while I'm handing out the review packets is take a look at each of the sections, page through the notes, and talk about them. Studies show if you condense and rewrite your notes in your own handwriting with diagrams and pictures and colors, then that's a study technique that helps you retain the information, and that's what we want. So as you go through looking at our notes from 5.1, what does it mean to be congruence? What is a congruent statement? What does the third angle theorem have to do all of this? Talk about your postulates and your theorems. Talk about why angle side side is not a theorem, why hypotenuse leg is. Work your way through CPCTC. Today's warm-up is a pretty good one. Which ones got you on this sort? Was it the parallel lines and the corresponding angles? Was it the hypotenuse leg and the right triangles? Was it the included side or included angle? So whichever ones you got wrong, make sure that you take a minute and rewrite some kind of study guide or information sheet for you. Take a moment and do that, please. If you need colors, I have colored pencils and highlighters up here for your use. Go ahead.